Let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking a completely new way to understand how stories are actually built. We are shifting away from the subjective, kind of fuzzy feelings of art and moving straight into the concrete mechanics of analytical systems. We're going to decode the science of story mechanics through a really fascinating concept called narrative engineering. Here's our blueprint for today's explainer. 1. The show don't tell problem. 2. Defining narrative engineering. 3. The objective projection method. 4. Engineering is seen. 5. Putting rules to the test. And finally, 6. Not a formula, a foundation. All right, starting us off with section 1, the show don't tell problem. We've all heard it, right? Show don't tell. If you've ever taken any sort of creative writing class, it is universally the most common and honestly the most frustrating piece of advice you'll get. Because let's be real, what exactly counts as showing? And how much is enough? When does a shown detail cross the line and just become, well, retelling? In a traditional workshop, a teacher might give you the verdict that your scene is telling, but they completely fail to give you an actual measurable mechanism to fix it. The advice is just incredibly vague. It's passed down through tradition rather than a concrete definition. So it leaves writers stuck with a diagnosis, but literally no precise cure. Which brings us to section 2, defining narrative engineering. Independent researcher Levent Bulut proposes a seriously compelling solution to all this ambiguity. The idea is to separate traditional craft from a structured framework. Think of it like this. On one side, you have creative writing. That relies on intuition, craft tradition, and workshop feedback to handle the big picture stuff. Things like your overarching theme, character voice, the moral weight of the story. On the other side, you have narrative engineering. Now, this framework doesn't even try to do all of that. Instead, it treats the encoding of emotion into physical detail as a strictly measurable design problem, complete with testable rules. So, how do they actually play together? Well, narrative engineering is essentially like music theory, but for writing. It provides an underlying measurable layer. Just like knowing your scales and intervals doesn't automatically write a beautiful symphony, these engineering parameters don't replace human creativity. I mean, nobody ever argues that learning chords makes a composer irrelevant, right? Instead, this framework just takes one specific, narrow slice of the craft and makes it teachable and testable. It leaves the true artistry exactly where it belongs, with you, the writer. Let's move into section 3 and see how this works, the objective projection method. So objective projection completely, and I mean entirely, avoids naming feelings. Instead, it forces you to encode abstract emotions through 6 tangible physical channels. We're talking light, heat, sound, movement, spatial pressure or openness, and geometry. Instead of just saying a character is scared or sad, a narrative engineer asks, okay, what is the specific sound, movement, or temperature in the room that proves it? You are taking the internal state and projecting it entirely into external physics. Now, sitting right on top of those physical channels are some really strict working rules. Step 1 is the emotion embargo. Literally, 0 emotion labels are allowed in the narrator's voice. None. Step 2 is the simile ban. This forces direct description rather than using lazy shortcuts like or as. And step 3 is the materialized metaphor, which means you have to reduce an abstract state down to a single, concrete, measurable detail. These rules aggressively force the writer to project internal states into the physical environment. No summarizing allowed. Okay, let's see this in action in section 4, engineering a scene. I want you to put your reader hat on for a second and really feel the difference here. She was waiting for the phone to ring, getting more anxious by the minute. This is your classic told scene. Notice how the emotion, the anxiety, is just stated flatly on the surface. The author is doing all the work, basically spoon-feeding you the conclusion and leaving absolutely nothing for your brain to reconstruct or experience. Now compare that to the engineered version. 2241, phone on the table, face up. She turned the mug 90 degrees, then back. The radiator clicked twice, went silent. Wow, right? Notice how the physical channels, the exact time, the specific movement, the sound, they perfectly reconstruct that feeling of anxiety without using a single emotion word. The rules are totally invisible in the final text. The emotion is just buried right there in the physical clues. And you, as the reader, organically rebuild that anxiety in your own mind. That right there, that is the show don't tell access actually functioning perfectly. But does this actually hold up? Let's dive into section 5, putting rules to the test.
Because this isn't just theory, guys. We have to look at the actual laboratory results. In a massive test across 120 scenes, the simile band rule worked flawlessly. It showed 100% agreement between a rule-based AI detector and human raters. So, highly functional, highly measurable. However, the materialized metaphor rule, it completely failed. In tests with multiple large language models and human raters, it produced basically chance-level agreement. It just didn't work.
But honestly, this failure highlights the incredibly cool scientific mindset of this entire endeavor. It means one of two things. Either the concept is just way too inferential for machines to catch right now, or the definition itself is flawed and needs fixing. It shows a massive level of humility. This is an evolving experiment, not some magic formula. Because the rules are so explicit, they are openly exposed to failure, and actually that public failure is exactly how the system improves. Which brings us to our final part today, Section 6. Not a formula, a foundation. To wrap everything up, we really need to clear the air on what narrative engineering is not. First off, it is for sure not a formula for good writing. A text could pass every single engineering rule we just talked about and still be completely dead on the page if it lacks the author's unique voice and moral weight. It is also not anti-intuition. It's literally just trying to explicitly map out what master writers already do naturally. It's an independent framework, not some deeply established academic discipline. And lastly, it absolutely does not claim that machines understand literature. I mean, the test failures we just looked at kind of prove that machines struggle deeply with reading between the lines.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Knowing the tangible, physical parameters of emotion, the light, the heat, the sound, the movement, how are you going to engineer the blueprint of your next story? Next time you sit down to write, or honestly, even just to read a book, I challenge you to look past the surface emotions. Look for that clicking radiator. Look for the physical evidence. Because I promise you, once you start seeing the mechanics underneath the magic, the way you understand stories is never going to be the same.